Hello and welcome. Well, looking back retrospectively at what we thought the new decade of the 2020s was going to be like, feature films and animated sitcoms like the Jetsons have past predicted a futuristic and utopian future. Now, as we all know, our experience with the year 2020 has been anything but. With instead of flying cars, we've had to go back to the basics of being reminded how to wash our hands. That being said, our experiences with COVID-19 have meant that our lives have increasingly become dependent on technology within a very short time frame. So with a stronger emphasis on our health and well-being, telehealth consultations have become the only access for many Australians to medical professionals. But the question is, what is telehealth and how can we adapt our lifestyles and become acquainted and familiarise ourselves with using it? Well, lucky for us, today we're speaking with Francesca Pinzone. Now, Francesca, is a co-founder and chief operating officer of Umbo, a social enterprise that addresses one of Australia's hidden problems, which is access to speech therapy and occupational therapy in regional Australia. Now, she is passionate about bringing health services to children in rural communities and removing social inequalities. Now, Francesca has a ton of qualifications, including a master's degree in international and public health from the University of Sydney, and she has over 12 years experience in working in not-for-profit organisations in overseas countries like Pakistan, UNICEF in India, and Canteen here in Australia. And she also teaches at the University of New South Wales at the Centre for Social Impact. And of course, she's a busy mother of 3 children, one which has received speech pathology. Is that from a remote perspective as well? Is that through telehealth services or not?
That was kind of prior to telehealth kind of being a bit more popular. So that was in a face-to-face clinic.
In a face-to-face. Well, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. Good. I love how you pronounce my name. It always makes me feel very Italian.
That's just the thing, because I love saying it, Francesca Pinzone. But if I'm going to say it like an Aussie, I'm going to say Francesca Pinzone. So really, and I always get stuck because I really just wanted to say it in the best way possible, which is just that big and beautiful, bold way. So Francesca Pinzone, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm really well. Nice to talk to you again, Rachel, and thank you so much for having me on again. It's been a really interesting couple of months, I think, since we last spoke. And yeah, lots of things have happened, but I know you guys are back into lockdown in Melbourne, and that's really challenging. I'm in Sydney, so it's a bit different, but yeah, we're here.
Well, that's it. Exactly. In Melbourne, we're in the midst of stage 4 COVID restrictions, which for anyone outside of Victoria is a little like we're all collectively being kept prisoner in our houses under house arrest with the curfew and the restrictions that we're all under at the moment. Of course, all with good reason, and that's to stop the spread of the virus. But honestly, I tell you what, if you had told me 12 months ago that the only access I personally would have with certain medical professionals was going to be via telehealth, I honestly would have thought that you were crazy. But, here we are. So I'd just love to know initially, as we were just saying earlier, just the fact that technology has actually changed the way that we are living within such a short time frame. I'd love to know initially, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's been such an interesting learning curve, I think, for so many people. And I feel like in terms of telehealth, we've been talking about this for quite a few years now. And actually, telehealth is not new. It has been going on for decades, particularly with the Royal Flying Doctors Service, who have been doing phone and radio consults for years for people who are, living in remote areas. So telehealth isn't new, but there's been a little bit of a fear, I think, around telehealth and actually, can you get great outcomes from telehealth as what you would get in a face-to-face consultation? But what we're finding now, I think, with COVID and having to go online, we've all worked out we can work from home well enough with being able to tap into meetings on Zoom or even just doing an interview like this. Previously it may have had to be face to face. So I think we've all adapted really well to technology and actually what it can do for us, and that we can function really well in society via technology.
Yes. Well, there's lots to cover, and I've got lots of questions I want to ask you. But before we get stuck into that, we published your article, and the title is "What is Telehealth and How Does It Work?" Now, for someone who hasn't yet read the article, can you please tell us what it's about and just what inspired you to write it?
Yeah. So I guess the inspiration for me to write that article was really being able to share our knowledge around telehealth, and that actually you can get really good outcomes from telehealth when you it's a really important tool that a lot of practitioners can have in their box, kind of really in their suite of tools. But the other reason for me, the real kind of reason to write that article is, at Umbo, we really want to help people, and we want to let you know that we are here and we have services that we can provide. So if you can't get access to a therapist, we can help you get access to a therapist, and we're here to kind of support you, because this is a really kind of challenging time for so many people, and we're here to support. So telehealth, it's I'm going to tell you what it's not, if that's okay. And it's not simply taking what you would do in person in a clinic and popping it online. So it's not it's not day-to-day practice just with Zoom or with another kind of IT tool. What telehealth is actually, and the way that we work at Umbo is we work from much more of a person-centered approach. So what we do is within kind of this, what we call online therapy or digital practice, moving away from that telehealth maybe title sometimes, because it can make people feel like it's a bit old, like they don't really understand it, is we're actually helping families work out what is best practice for them and what's going to work for their family the most. So it moves away from this clinical model, this typical model where I'm the clinician and I know what's best for you and I'm going to help tell you what's best for you. It's a much more of a medical model that we've been a little bit used to. And it actually is putting the person at the center of everything they do and saying, actually, what are the goals that you want for yourself and your family? What is it that you need? And we work off those goals. So that's person-centered practice. And digital practice is using tools like, not Zoom. We don't use Zoom for privacy issues, but using kind of different channels. It's using other kind of online components. It's using the phone, whatever it might be, in order to undertake therapy. The other kind of unique part about it is, when we look at the previous way of delivering therapy, often in a clinic, which, don't get me wrong, obviously has its a huge amount of merit and it works really well for a lot of people. But what we do, we actually help families and we coach the people around that particular kind of client or patient. So say it was your son, we may work with your preschool teacher, his preschool teacher, with his school teacher, with maybe the GP, somebody within that kind of network of family. It doesn't always have to be the parent, to actually kind of almost upskill them into therapy and help them on a day-to-day basis work with that child.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a couple of different aspects. So what we actually do is we help grow a community and their capability, but we're also asking that question, what is it that you want? What's best for your family? What works best? It's not, can I pronounce something this way? It might be, well, I really want that person to be comfortable going in and ordering a coffee in a coffee shop or a baby chino or something.
Cool. So you've now sort of explained what it's not, but just, I guess, more so for my simple heart and mind, could you maybe just explain what telehealth is and how does it work then in general?
Yeah. So telehealth is the delivery of services basically in an online format.
Okay.
For us, it's around setting goals, understanding what a client needs, and then delivering that therapy almost like in this type of environment.
Okay. So telehealth is like an innovative way to distribute health-related services and information via electronic telecommunication technologies. I guess overall, and one of the many benefits, of course, that it allows long-distance patient and clinical contact care and advice, would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So generally what, for, I guess, all different medical practitioners, what sort of appointments can be made via telehealth then?
Look, we're seeing GPs constantly doing telehealth appointments. There's some things they can't do, but a lot of GP appointments can be done by telehealth. Any other kind of medical professional can do appointments by telehealth. We have speech therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, dietitian, nutrition. So there's most of the allied health services can be done by telehealth.
And is it common? I mean, is there many Australians currently using telehealth at the moment?
Yeah, we've seen a really big rise. Up to 4 million Australians are currently using telehealth. Yeah, in April, studies have shown. So there's been a huge increase and a much better understanding of what it actually is.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one of the world's best kept secrets at the moment. And I guess as you just mentioned before, one of the most common misconception is that telehealth cannot be as effective as a one-on-one personal sessions. But I'd love to know initially, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, studies are showing us that you actually can get the same benefits and the same efficacy as what you would get in a clinic. And in actual fact, there's a lot of kind of key benefits around the delivery of a service via telehealth. And actually, just to throw it in there, one of my co-founder, Ed Johnson, who is a speech therapist of over 10 years, is just completing his PhD on the efficacy, comparing the efficacy of online therapy and face-to-face. And he is proving that there is really good outcomes from telehealth.
So how would you describe then? What are the main benefits for parents and kids then?
Well, look, I think that there's multiple benefits, and a lot of them are the practicalities of day-to-day life. When you think about, being a parent, taking multiple kids to appointments, packing everybody in the car, the time you spend. For people who live in rural and regional areas, there's a cost implication of travel. So you may have to travel 4 to 5 hours to see a therapist each way, which is not uncommon. So there's multiple benefits. One is around time and the availability of clinicians, but also I can do a therapy session at 8 a.m. and my son's still in his pajamas, and that's no problem. And I may well be in my pajamas too, who knows? So that's one. The other part is, obviously there's cost savings around travel and transportation. The other thing is it's really good for clinicians to be able to see your child in their home environment.
In real time.
So you can describe things, but the reality of trying to describe what they're like at dinner time, but actually having the session during dinner and actually having the therapist coach you through that process during
in real
dinner.
time. Yeah. So for example, issues can be observed in real time, like with fussy eating issues at the dinner table. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. Continue.
Go. Sorry. It's also that, we can describe what our home environment is like, but actually you get a sneak peek as a clinician into, you can see the other kids running around in the background. You can see the TV going, or someone's trying to cook dinner while doing homework, and you actually just get to know that child a little bit better because you're kind of in their home with them.
And do you have any tips how, I guess, you can navigate engaging telehealth consultations then and to get the most out of them?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. And look, the therapists are so skilled at doing this. And my son now has had telehealth with one of our clinicians. And at first I thought, oh, he's not going to sit there. He's going to, he's not going to be engaged. But it's quite a unique experience to watch a clinician who is really skilled at talking to a child, not use any other kind of games or toys, just use speech, but be able to do an assessment in that online environment. It's quite incredible to watch a therapist be able to do that and get a really good understanding of your child out of that, and then take the key pieces that they understand of your child and build on those during different sessions.
So what are some of the more common challenges that parents and children generally face with telehealth consultations?
Look, sometimes we have challenges of technological challenges. I think we're all seeing those. We all put ourselves on mute by accident. And so there are tech challenges, but one thing that we learn is it doesn't always have to be video. So if you can then pick up the phone and continue your session on the phone, that's not a problem. One of the accessibility challenges, particularly for families in rural and regional areas, is they may not have access to a computer or an iPad. And that's why we work really closely in partnership with schools and preschools, because you would find that they would have it. And so your child can have therapy during school hours, utilising the school's computer. So the challenges for parents, there actually aren't many. It's actually a really incredible way to access therapy from your home environment.
But for people that love to have that face-to-face contact, understanding in Melbourne as an example currently now, but in the future and or in many other sort of scenarios throughout Australia, there might be families that are hesitant to be able to have face-to-face consultations to get out of the house, etc. Many parents and families would still be hesitant to try telehealth. So how do they actually know if it's right for them and their family then?
Well, at Umbo, so what we enable families to do is have a 15-minute consult first. So we have a consult with one of our teams, so we can actually explain what telehealth is, but also to check if it is right for their family. 9 times out of 10, it is a great option for families. And if it's not going to work for a family, there may be that a family has a child with a disability who needs to go into the hospital anyway, so would prefer to wrap all those appointments up in that one kind of day or session. So we can understand behind that. But mostly the benefits really outweigh any kind of potential detractors.
Mm-hmm. And the benefits being lifestyle benefits, as you mentioned before. The fact that you can have the consultation in real time. There's probably lower wait time for consultations and those types of things. How else would you describe what some of the benefits are then?
The therapeutic benefits are incredible. So what we are seeing now, and I have a colleague who I work with whose son is receiving teletherapy. She's spent a lot of time over the last couple of years seeing different clinicians. But what she's finding is some of the particular things that her son is doing, early morning practice with the therapist, those types of things, they're the things you can't get in a clinic, but they're the things you can get through teletherapy. So that's kind of one of the, it's a little bit more practical, but it actually is a really good therapeutic benefit. And the other thing is going back to that coaching model of, if you're in person in a clinic, you're often not working with other people who are surrounding that child. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you do teletherapy, you can access multiple people that are involved in that child's life. And so therefore you can work with multiple different people if you need to, in order so they can get the best benefit.
Okay. Can you expand on this a little bit more? What are you meaning by this?
Yeah, so when we work from a coaching model, what we're doing is we're not just always working with the parent. So what we find is we may allocate who we call a key worker, and that may be a preschool teacher, it may be a support coordinator, or it could be the parent, but we work with them, not just the parents, in actually delivering kind of therapy. So we teach them what to do in the interim while you're not having therapy, in the week between or the weeks between. And those kind of practice activities that a child may do, or some of the warm-up things they may do, it's not always the parent doing that. So what I feel it's kind of like you're wrapping that child with multiple people who can help them, not just one person. And so then what we do is we slowly upskill those people. So say it was a preschool teacher and we're teaching them new techniques to work with one particular child. They may identify another child who they can, work with as well, or they may identify some speech issues. So you're actually kind of slowly upskilling other people into that kind of role of doing some kind of therapeutic intervention as well.
So you're saying if you see a child, is this typical for all telehealth consultations, irrespective of what the medical profession is? Is that how it generally works for all?
It depends. This is the model that we work from at Umbo. So no, not necessarily.
Okay, right. So yeah, how does it generally work? I mean, and what else, I guess, from a general perspective, in speaking to Joe Public about telehealth, that maybe they haven't used it before, they're completely unfamiliar with it. What do parents actually need to know about telehealth during the pandemic? And then also about using telehealth after the pandemic as well?
Yeah. So parents just need to know that it's available and it's accessible. So it will work within your lifestyle, and it's very accessible, but also that it's a really good tool to get therapy. If you can't go to a clinic, there's no barriers for you to access teletherapy. I think they're the kind of key things, is that it's really important for parents to try and look outside the box. I think the other thing is we're moving much more into a technological world. Like we're not, we don't have to always it's not even face to face, it's in person, because we're face to face, and I feel like you can actually have a really good conversation, or you can actually get good outcomes in this kind of environment. So it's accessible, it's available, but it has really good therapeutic outcomes. And there's lots and lots of people who've been doing teletherapy or telehealth for many, many years, so it's not new. It's just that it's becoming more and more mainstream that you can actually have this as an option. Post-pandemic, I would probably say if it's working for you, there's probably no reason to change what you're doing. We have clients who are purely, most all our clients are purely using telehealth, and we've been in business for a couple of years. So they have been for a couple of years pre-pandemic. We even have one client, just to give you a story, we have one client who has traveled all around Australia receiving therapy for over 6 months. So, there's great things that can happen.
And you mentioned earlier on about the consultations. I mean, would you recommend that with families during the pandemic, that they, once they maybe embark on trialing telehealth consultation with any medical professional, that they should sort of request a consultation to see if that actually works for them? I mean, like anything, when you're trying something new for the first time, obviously there's going to be some some bumps along the road and those types of things as well. But is this something that you recommend that everyone should be sort of trialing with any consultation, and or like what I don't know, what advice can you sort of give for anyone sort of in that scenario trying it for the first time as well, that may be a little bit hesitant?
Yeah, I think if your situation merits a telehealth consult, so even if you were to go to a GP and you want to describe your symptoms, they may not need to do a physical examination. I don't know, you need to go and get a new script, all those types of things. There is no reason it couldn't be done over, online. So I think that it does enable, I think we need to take the fear out of it. There seems to be a little bit sometimes with people fear, and it may not be a fear of trying something new, it's just a fear whether you can actually get what you need from the therapy. And I think we need to strip that away a little bit and actually just say, we can do this online. It's a great way to actually get the services that you need. You probably don't have to wait 6 months at a clinic. There's massive waiting lists across Australia for speech and occupational therapists. You don't have to wait that long. There are people available to help you. It's just around kind of dipping your toe in the water and actually seeing you can have great benefits from it.
And I guess the $1 million question really is, I mean, is there any legal issues associated with telehealth? And if so, what are they? And what are the existing protocols that any medical professional must sort of adhere to? And which is very important, I think, for any sort of families sort of trialing it and or going to continue using it after the pandemic.
Yeah, so it is, there are privacy, obviously, requirements that you need to meet. So what we would encourage families to do, and obviously I'm going from the assumption that the medical professionals know what they're doing here and have actually got legal advice and understand their risk, is that families take a look at the privacy policy, take a look at the storage of information policy that a clinic would have, and make sure that they're across that. They know the medium that it's used. So we use a specific at Umbo, we use a specific teletherapy platform. We don't use Zoom because it isn't encrypted enough and it's hosted in the US, and so we don't use that. And so we use a different platform for that. So make sure that you've done a little bit of research, ask them for their privacy policy, make sure that they're across everything so that you feel confident when you're going in. How are they storing my information? How are they recording the sessions, and what's happening with my data? I know a lot of GPs are doing mainly phone consults as opposed to telehealth, like the online actual video consult, for various different reasons around privacy and security.
Okay. So aside from the legal questions, what other questions should a parent be asking, I guess, within a new provider? Is there anything else you think, for example, I mean, are you given homework? Is that something that generally when you go to see a medical professional, that you sort of have your physio exercises or whatever it is that you have to do afterwards? But, what other sort of questions can you maybe suggest to families sort of, have ready to ask as well?
Yeah, I think it's really important to ask what is the kind of, and you'll know this after an assessment, after you've had that first assessment with a therapist, you'll probably know what your child needs to do and what you need to work on with your child. So there may be what we kind of call homework. Can I just tell, maybe this is the best way to describe it. So what I really love about this kind of idea of person-centered practice is, rather than doing an assessment and saying to the family, your child's having meltdowns, but what I can see is that they're actually having trouble communicating. And so let's start working on these sounds. And then you work on the sounds. That's a kind of more typical approach. Or, what we're saying is, what would make your family's life best? How would it work? And it might be, well, every time we get in the car, we don't want to have a meltdown. And so you actually work on that as the goal, as opposed to saying, oh, here's how we pronounce these sounds, because we think that there's a link here. But actually the problem is, it could be something like a child not being able to communicate that they're scared of the car because of a certain reason. And so if you actually really identify, how would we make your family life better? And what is the goal we're going to work on? It kind of flips that narrative of homework and this kind of model. And it actually is, what are all the things on a daily basis we're going to do to help make us get into the car well and have that as a good experience? And the therapist comes up with goals with the family in order to achieve that. Or it may be that, your child wants to say hi to someone in the playground. So we coach your child on how to do that.
And is that typical, I guess, for medical professionals using telehealth as a service to be able to provide the service in that way, and or is that just sort of something that your organisation does?
It's something we definitely do. I probably can't comment on any other organisations at this point because I think that the uptake has been so new. So people probably, you know, like widespread and new. So people probably haven't quite, you know, we don't really know any studies into that, but definitely at Umbo, that's kind of how we work.
Okay, great. So I guess that being said, what are some of the other challenges, I guess, of the current healthcare system for parents that you're trying to change with Umbo then?
So there are a number of challenges that we see within the current healthcare system. And the reason Umbo exists is because we see health inequality in access to healthcare. And it doesn't sit well with us. And so that's why we decided to start our organisation as a social enterprise, and speech and occupational therapy is one way to change that system. So what typically happens, and particularly you see this inequality in more regional and rural, and specifically in remote areas as well, there's a huge disparity in access to services. So what we see is that people may get a therapist fly in and fly out of an area once every kind of 4-6 weeks. So you may get therapy, but it's not in an ongoing basis. And then you may also have a different therapist each time. So you lack that continuity of care. And when you're working with children, and we work with adults as well, but when you work with children or children with disabilities, it's really important to have a good continuity of care, not only for just kind of rapport between the therapist and the family, but also for, you know, delivery of outcomes. And so what we see is this inability to access services in a timely manner. Currently, if you live in Dubbo, there's an 18-month wait list to see a therapist.
Wow.
And so we're working in Dubbo with a preschool with over 60 children who, you know, were on a wait list for 18 months. The other problem that we see is that there's a lot of messages, and they're really accurate messages, that says early intervention is key. But if you can't access a therapist and everyone's saying you need to get this problem sorted by the time that they're 5, and you're on a 2-year wait list to see a therapist, you're in panic mode as a parent. Your stress and anxiety, thinking I actually cannot get the service my child needs, is really high. So what we're trying to do is minimize all that, as well as some other kind of practical things. But really, the healthcare system isn't set up for people in rural and regional areas very well.
Mm-hmm. And is it really important for families to find a provider who's actually skilled in telehealth? Is there a difference in providing face-to-face consultations and then sort of being equipped and experienced to be able to deliver services in that medium from a telehealth perspective? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a huge difference. And what we are trying to do is help upskill as many therapists as we possibly can. So there are many, many differences. And my colleague, Ed Johnson, is wonderful to talk to about this, because he can explain exactly. It's not just transferring what happens in a clinic environment onto an online environment. It's much more detailed than that. What we are trying to do is, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask, so families, when they are new to telehealth, and how would they sort of be able to ask, I guess, a medical professional in a nice way, and or to be able to suss out their experience in delivering telehealth services?
Yeah, I think it's just really important to ask the question, how long have you been undertaking telehealth? And I think for certain, you know, if you're looking at an ongoing therapeutic relationship like a speech or occupational therapist or a physiotherapist, it is really important. You know, it's probably more important than maybe, you know, a GP consult, for example, where you maybe don't have that ongoing goal-setting therapeutic relationship. So just ask the question, how long have you been undertaking teletherapy? Have you done any training in it? You know, why did you do teletherapy? Because what we really don't necessarily want to see is clinics who bring on using telehealth, and then when the pandemic's over, it just goes to the wayside, because actually it's a really great tool that a lot of therapists can kind of have in their toolbox in order to deliver another type of service. You could do a blended kind of service of telehealth and face-to-face or in-person consultation. So yeah, for families, just ask a couple of questions, find out more. We offer training to therapists. We do an online training package where therapists can be trained in online therapy, just so that, you know, we are trying to expand the knowledge of teletherapy and help as many people as we can.
Mm-hmm. So I guess in an ideal world, you know, really, what does the future of telehealth and health look like to you? And, you know, and really, how far are we off from that reality? And what do we need to do to get there then?
the pandemic has been a real tipping point, I think, in this environment, and I hope it's changed the mindset and maybe the narrative around telehealth, that actually it's a great way to deliver services. We don't want to see it go anywhere, and in fact, we want to expand it. We want to see more therapists practicing telehealth and actually having it as, like I said, a part of their repertoire, something that they can offer to families in need. It also means that there's hundreds of thousands of people living in regional areas with a disability who don't get the services they need, and we can look at NDIS uptake of plan funds, and in some areas it's 25%, which means 75% of the money that they have been allocated is unable to be spent because there's no services. And the highest is around 65%. So it just tells us that services aren't there. So what we want to see is this expansion of services, expansion of telehealth, so we can reach more and more people to have the services they need.
And from a regional perspective, as opposed to being on a 12-month waiting list, let's say if you live in Dubbo, as you've just suggested, you pretty much would be able to get access to a medical professional anywhere in Australia, provided you have any telecommunications and or a phone line or whichever medium you're using within a week or within a few days type of things. That's what you're saying. Overall, so from that perspective, it really does expand the opportunity for people to be able to have access to quality services right throughout Australia.
Totally. Absolutely. That's exactly what it does. And that's what we're trying to do. Reduce this inequality that exists based on location. It doesn't have to be like that. There are technologies available that we need to tap into to make sure that people have equitable access.
So how do we change this then? How do we actually make it more viable and accessible for all Australians then?
This is where, it's trying to change a system is complex. It's tricky.
The paradigm shift. Yeah.
It's paradigm shift, and we need to make sure that we approach this with a real kind of space of critical thinking and understanding what the system is that we're playing in. So when we look at something like the health system and how it interlinks with disability and the government, and it's really complex. It's really complex, but it's an important shift, and it's a really important conversation we need to have. And we need to advocate for families living in rural and regional areas. We need to say that this isn't okay. That they don't have access to services. So what we've seen happen is like the changes to Medicare since COVID-19 is that prior to this, telehealth was only available for psychologists in order to build, and then it increased to GPs, and actually it has expanded to speech and occupational therapy services, which means that people can actually get rebates on their therapy, which has never happened before. And in fact, we had an internal conversation about this in January, and we talked about it just would never happen. It would never become, go on Medicare. And then look what's happened. So we have to change the system, and we just have to do it one step at a time. But we also have to really be conscious of our ability to advocate for people who need assistance.
It definitely is the future, and we need to be pushing forward with this. This has been a real eye-opener. I've definitely learned a lot listening to you today. For anyone watching or listening, how would you, I guess, summarize what your key messages are for any of our audience?
Oh, that's a big question for me. I'm not very good at summarizing. Look, I think that don't be scared of telehealth. It's not new. It's been around for a long time. There's incredible outcomes that you can have from that. But also, we don't just want to work in the model that we've been working before. We want to work in a model where actually the person who is receiving therapy, we're asking them what they need, and we're working towards goals that suit them and their family. So, get in contact. We're happy to talk to you all the time. We have clinicians, or we can share with you other people who are working in this space, if that's what you want. So yeah, take the first step, because we're here, we're ready to kind of provide services, but we're also ready to just tell you more about, what you can actually get out of telehealth.
That's wonderful. And if anyone's got any other questions and or want to reach out to you guys after this interview, whereabouts can they find you?
Yeah, please go to our website, so www.umbo.com.au, and that's UMBO. We have clinicians who are available to talk to you. I'm very happy to talk to anyone. I know what it's like when you've got 3 kids dragging them into a clinic for therapy. I've been there, and I tell you, it is easier. There is an easier way. Definitely. that.
We've definitely opened up the eyes and the minds of many people. And thank you for this introduction talk and discussion on telehealth today. It's been wonderful. Take care, and can't wait for our next chat. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.